merge solenoid for any model, regardless of Phaeton Bus, Red, Allegro, or Breeze, is going to be on the DCD panel starting with 2018 and newer. So can't really see it here, but on the back side there's a fairly large merge solenoid right in the middle here, and that merge solenoid merges the house and chassis batteries together under certain conditions. So condition one would be you're plugged into shore, coach is parked, and you've got the inverter chargers charging. Under those three conditions, so your battery voltage is up on your house, it's actually looking to see if the Magnum charger is charging, because if the battery voltage might be up okay, but maybe the charger's turned off. We don't want to merge, because all we're going to just do is deplete the house batteries just to charge the chassis batteries. So we're looking to see if the inverter charger is enabled, and so we're looking at the voltage being above a certain level, and we're looking for the charger being in the charging position. Okay? So at that point it will allow the chassis batteries to be charged from the house by closing that solenoid and joining the two battery banks. Now in the case where a house is charging chassis batteries, it will merge for 1 hour, and then it will unmerge, and then it'll reassess the situation. It'll see, if the chassis batteries are high enough now that it doesn't need to remerge, and it'll just leave it. If the battery voltage on the chassis batteries is above 12.4, it'll just leave it. If the batteries are below 12.4, it'll merge again and recharge, continue charging for another hour, and it'll just keep going through that cycle. Okay? And this is all something, I know there have been questions on this. We have on our website a new section that's going to have that based on every model year, because I know the merging of this has sometimes raised a lot of questions, and the merge logic I just described to you maybe isn't something that's easily remembered for every model. So we actually have on our website under each model year the specific logic, the schematic that goes over the merge system, shows specific details about that we'll have on our website here. It's actually going up this week. So the other scenario is that your chassis would charge your house batteries. So you're going down the road and you have the alternator producing power to charge the chassis batteries in your house. It doesn't have anything going on with it other than you might have some lights on, so it may be drawing those house batteries down. So what we do is kind of reverse that role now, and the chassis batteries would charge the house batteries if the chassis voltage is above 12.6, and it's actually more like 13 volts. It's all in the documentation, the exact numbers. And then if the house voltage is below a certain level, it will merge those two batteries, and it will merge them indefinitely. There's no time frame involved. It'll just keep them merged indefinitely. Okay? But it has to make sure that you've got an alternator charging before it'll do that, and then it'll just merge. The only condition then that would unmerge it is if the ignition switch turns off, or the chassis battery voltage drops too low. In other words, the alternator stopped charging for some reason, or if the generator started, because now we're going to assume that the generator is going to take over charging the house batteries. So if we see the generator start while they're going down the road, some people do that to run an air conditioner or something, then it'll stop that merge as well under those three conditions. So I know that's something that you maybe have run into a few questions about, customers asking, my chassis batteries are dead, what's going on? Some of the things that you want to look for, and it's shown in that schematic, I should have had it up here, is there's a 5 amp inline fuse that comes to the G8 module that is what we're reading for chassis voltage. And if for some reason that 5 amp fuse was blown, we wouldn't be seeing chassis voltage, and so we wouldn't know if it's appropriate to merge. Okay? And you would notice that because on your home page you would see the chassis battery voltage at 0 volts. Okay? So that's pretty much a giveaway that A, you've either got a blown fuse, or B, the wire going from that fuse to the G8 module is maybe come unplugged. Another possibility is the G8 module itself has got an issue and needs to be replaced. So the chassis voltage comes into one of these pins here, and it's one of those that has had some issues over time where the wire just came unplugged, maybe wasn't pushed in all the way, so the chassis voltage wouldn't be reading properly in that case. So outside of that, the merge side of things is pretty straightforward. If you ever have a merge solenoid that for some reason has failed, it is possible, instead of replacing the whole panel, pretty much any of the components on this panel can be serviced or replaced. So there's really no need to replace the whole DCD panel here. If you have a breaker that's damaged, you can replace that. If you have a solenoid or one of these battery switches that have failed, you can replace that. There's also those large black fuses on the back that I mentioned, I think, the other day, that are used for overcurrent protection for the HWH slide outs, the inverter charger, the generator, and for the dash air conditioning system. So it's kind of like a block fuse that you just have on a bus bar that's part of the panel, and then they just put their battery cable on top of that fuse, and it protects it then at whatever rating the fuse is rated for. They are kind of a different fuse. If you haven't seen them, you can just take a look back here. It is a different fuse that the service department does stock here now. It's also the same fuse that they're putting on the battery posts. You'll know if you've worked on the batteries at all on an 18 or 19, they have a little box fuse that goes right on the battery post, and it's the same type of fuse that's used on the back of this panel here. So any of those components on there can be serviced or replaced.